Good morning. How y'all doing? Jeff Ratanapool. I always start every meeting by telling you the origins of my last name because people say, Ratanapool, what is that? My dad is from Bangkok, Thailand. My mom is from Harlan, Kentucky. I'm an Asian coal miner. And you will notice that the very last bullet point on my bio is I've been hired as an expert witness in several lawsuits not pertaining to CMC. And that is the extent of my legal knowledge. So that is why your true featured speaker today is going to be Jeff Kibbe. He is the gentleman that went to Washington, spoke to the CFPB. What you're going to learn today is we're going to describe the Dodd-Frank Act. We are going to tell you who the CFPB is, their objectives, and then we're going to discuss how these changes affect you as a real estate agent and ultimately all of our borrowers, sellers, etc. So before we do that, I want to show you a little exercise. So I asked Jeff to be my Vanna White. So Jeff, can you come on up, please? So I'm gonna show you what really got us here. So these are the old underwriting guidelines, okay? Yes, Mr. Kibbe, I understand that you would like a home loan. You have an 850 credit score. I need to give you a test. This is a mirror. Okay, hold it. Could you please put it under your nose and breathe? Okay, one moment. He is breathing, did not steal the mirror, not a thief. Congratulations, you have a home loan. $750,000, no money down, no documentation. I need nothing, just keep breathing and we'll see you at the closing. Now, a small stretch, but as you know, very close to the truth. I've been lending for 16 years. I've been in it when we had to prove things. I was in it when we didn't have to prove things, and we're in it now that we have to prove things again. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over to my friend and my paternal twin, by the way, Jeff Kibbe, Corporate Counsel, Century Mortgage.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here today. My last name is less interesting than Jeff's. Although I live in Louisville, however, I'm originally from Indianapolis, so it's great to be back home to see some old friends in the audience. And thank you for having us here today. We will be talking today about, starting out a little bit with the basics. What is the Dodd-Frank Act? Who is the CFPB? Why do they exist and what do they do? And then we'll dig in a little bit to the specific rules that the CFPB has issued just this last January and what is expected to come over the course of the next 18 to 24 months. So a little bit of background and a little bit of history. What is the Dodd-Frank Act? It was written in 2008 by Barney Frank and Senator Dodd out of Connecticut, and it was in reaction to what happened to our industry back in 2008 and 2009, and we remember what happened back then. Kaboom! It was a reaction to the economic crisis, a big mushroom cloud over our industry, brought about by a number of factors, some of them being lending regulations or lack thereof, some of them being acting within the community and the way people lent money or borrowed money, and a number of other factors. But it was a combination of things that came forward and caused the economic crisis. So the Dodd-Frank Act was drafted to prevent the sort of things that caused the economic crisis. For example, one of the goals of the Dodd-Frank Act is to prevent the too big to fail scenario. I'm sure you've heard that in the news over time. Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, AIG, a number of giant corporations became so important systemically to our economy that the failure of any one of those actors would have a systemic effect on our national economy overall. So the Dodd-Frank Act aims to prevent companies from having that sort of influence or that sort of largeness in the financial sector. Additionally, the Dodd-Frank Act's goal is to extricate, to a degree, the U.S. economy from the world economy. Because the U.S. had become so intertwined in the world economy, the failure of one large company like AIG or whatever would not only have an effect on our national economy, but would also have an effect on the world economy because the U.S. had become so important in the world economy. So the Dodd-Frank Act looks not just to the United States economy, but to the world economy as well. The most important aspect, and the one that you hear the most about, is to promote transparency in our financial services markets. Much of what was going on in the early 2000s was known to the players in the industry, but perhaps wasn't known to the regulators as well as it could have been, and perhaps wasn't known to the borrowers, the customers, and the people who were on the base level of the U.S. economy. So the Dodd-Frank Act intends to correct that and to bring transparency to the lending process, to the credit markets, and to virtually any type of credit transaction here. Greater accountability is the next step beyond that. If we have transparency and we know what the markets are doing, then if we detect something has gone wrong, those lenders, those borrowers, whoever has done something wrong should be accountable for the errors or the omissions that they have made. So the Dodd-Frank Act sets up a number of penalties for any type of error or misdeed. And then finally, the overall goal to maintain safety of our financial markets. If we set up these regulations correctly and we implement the regulations correctly, then overall the financial market remains safe and we don't have a repeat of what happened in 2008. So the Dodd-Frank Act, as you can see with all those goals in mind, has a lot that it needs to do. And if you look at it fairly and objectively, it really is the largest piece of financial regulation that has come out of Washington since the Great Depression. And it intends to have, and probably will have, the most effect on our financial markets than any other act that we will see now or in the near future. So we know what the goals are of the Dodd-Frank Act. How does the Dodd-Frank Act address those goals, and how does it complete those goals? Well, it sets up a regulatory framework. The Dodd-Frank Act, as a federal statute, sets out the minimum standards or the requirements that the legislature wants to see in the financial market. Then it passes the ball over to the CFPB and says, CFPB, you go ahead and write rules and write regulations to implement these goals or these requirements that we have. So the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is a brand new entity in the United States government. It is assigned the task of implementing the Dodd-Frank Act, and it does this in a number of ways. It has rule-making authority. The CFPB will publish proposed rules and then ultimately final rules to implement the Dodd-Frank Act. They'll take a certain section of the statute, to Truth in Lending Act Section 129, for example, and they will say, this is what we believe the Truth in Lending Act means, this is what we believe you have to do to comply with the Truth in Lending Act, and this is how we think you should comply with the Truth in Lending Act. After the CFPB publishes its intention and its interpretation, the industry and your association and a number of other associations will give the CFPB feedback. Here's how we think your rule should work, here's the problems with it, here's what we like about it, and then the CFPB ingests that commentary and publishes a final rule. The final rule then has the force of law at some date in the future. In addition to the rulemaking authority, the CFPB has supervisory authority as well. It can oversee anyone in the credit industry, it can audit anyone in the credit or financial services industry, and then following that, it can enforce any type of law against the players in the financial services industries. So, excuse me, many lenders, many credit card issuers, and many other players in the financial services industry has already seen the CFPB come into their offices, conduct an audit, and then issue fines if necessary, or issue a clean bill of health. Finally, the CFPB will accomplish its goals by researching and reporting the success or failure of its activities. And these reports actually are very interesting. You can find them online at the CFPB's website. They will tell you what their research says, how they believe their rules are impacting your industry, and then you have the opportunity to comment back to the CFPB and help them shape their future rules. So that's an important part of their mission. It's important to note that the CFPB is an independent agency that operates within the Federal Reserve System. Its director has been appointed by President Obama, and that director is not accountable to Congress. They do not receive their funding from Congress, and so the CFPB acts as an autonomous entity within the United States government, not necessarily under the supervision or control of Congress. This gives the CFPB, I think, unprecedented authority and